when I tell you the beast is out, Dr. Umar. Yes, baby, you know Dr. Umar, the pro-black Dr. Umar. Honey, when I tell you he is speaking about Nolan Wells, he wanted all of us to go to Oceanside, Mississippi in March and let the whole world know what they're trying to cover up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Because if they get away with Nolan Wells, they're going to keep doing it. I keep on hearing bodies, black bodies, popping up in Mississippi trees. Yes, honey, and they've been hiding it. Honey, I'm with my brother when he right. Comment, I want to know what y'all think. Watch this video, y'all. Comment, I got to hear what y'all got to say about this.
There are two ways to leave Horn Island. You leave on a boat, or you do not leave. There is no third option. No bridge, no road, no ferry running on a schedule, no house with a porch light on. 10 miles of open gulf sit between that beach and the Mississippi mainland, and the island itself is federal ground, a protected seashore where nobody lives, because nobody is permitted to. On the morning of July 4th, a group of teenagers ran out there for the holiday. Roughly 30 of them, spread across 3 boats. 8 people rowed out on one of those boats. 7 came back. The 8th was 18 years old. His phone came back without him. His keys came back without him. He did not. 2 days later, at the northwest tip of the island, his body surfaced. His name was Nolan Wells. Since then, 2 pathologists have examined him. Neither one can tell you how he died. The state's report is finished, and it is sealed. It stays sealed until a grand jury sees it, and nobody outside that room will know who sat on it or how they decided. No one has been arrested. No one has been cleared. More than a month later, his mother still cannot tell you what happened to her child. The silence left a vacuum, and the internet filled it. A fake toxicology report spread far enough that the state had to publicly denounce it. AI-generated videos of his family circulated until his mother started flagging them herself. Millions of views collected on a boy who cannot correct a single word said about him. One voice stayed out of it entirely. For a month, Umar Johnson said nothing. This week he explained why. He had watched Ferguson. He had watched Baltimore. He had watched what happens when everyone with a camera arrives at a family's worst day at the same time, and he did not want to be one more of them. Then he spoke for over an hour. What he delivered was not a tribute, it was a list. Questions about 2 boats nobody searched. A phone that traveled home without its owner. A distress call placed inside the exact window Nolan Wells was last seen alive. Tissue that never reached the second examination table. Some of it holds up against the public record, some of it does not. Some of it cannot be verified by anyone right now, including us, and we are going to tell you which is which and exactly why. Because after a fake report reached 1 million people, you should not accept anything less than that. No charges have been filed in this case. Everyone named here is entitled to the presumption of innocence. But these questions were asked out loud, and more than 30 days later, nobody in Jackson County has answered them. Here is Dr. Umar Johnson, in his own words. Watch it carefully. Listen to what he is asserting, and listen to what he is asking, because they are not the same thing. And the difference between them is the entire reason this video exists.
Why are we on White Devil Horns Island anyway, celebrating George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton and all these other white supremacists and slave masters? Why are we even celebrating them anyway? Nolan shouldn't have been out there. Javon shouldn't have been out there. No black person should have been celebrating the 4th of July, period. We would be enslaved for almost another century after America got her independence. So what are we celebrating for? To celebrate the 4th of July as an African is to celebrate the enslavement of your ancestors and the freedom of your slave masters. It makes no sense. Now, with that being said, I'm not blaming Nolan in any way, shape, form, or fashion for his loss of life. I'm just simply saying he shouldn't have been out there. Now let's take a closer look at this, Art. According to what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and what I've read, Nolan, Warren, Wyatt, and Trayston left for Horn Island the morning of July 4th. According to Warren's own words that he offered during an interview with Officer B.T., That's Coon as in C-U-N-E, Coon as in K-H-E-W-N, Coon as in K-U-H-N, Coon as in C-O-N-N. So Warren did a sit down with Officer BT, and as we all know, BT is white YouTube's pet monkey. He's white YouTube's pet monkey. So Warren sat down for an interview with white YouTube's pet monkey. And he said that they left for Horns Island the morning of July the 4th, and that it was approximately 30 of them spread across 3 boats. Approximately 30 youth spread across 3 boats. They all went to Horn Island together. They arrived at approximately 11:30. So they left around 9-ish, 8, 9-ish, whatever the case may be. They left the morning of July 4th. They arrived on White Devil's Horn Island at about 11:30. So 3 boats, 30 youth, they went together. I'm not clear on whether the 3 boats came back together or not. That's another question that I have, Art. Did they come back together the same way they left together? Because I'm treating all 30 of those white youth and all 3 of those ships as crime scenes and as suspects. All 3 ships are potential crime scenes. All 3 boats are potential crime scenes, and all 30 youth are potential suspects. I don't know why Jackson County Sheriff Ledbetter or Jackson County District Attorney Mulrath, I don't know why they decided to separate the boat that Nolan was on, Warren's boat. I don't know why they separated that boat from the other 2 for purposes of investigation and analysis, because those 3 boats operated as a team. And since they went out there as a team, and it hasn't been made clear to me whether or not they came back together as a team, all 30 white youth and all 3 boats should have been part of this investigation, not just the 1 boat. That is my first big issue with this case. Who decided to separate the other 2 boats and the other 20 or so youth? I got a problem with that, Art, because according to the Cajun Navy, they have no GPS information on the other 2 boats, Art. They have no GPS information on the other 2 boats. Now let's get into this. According to Warren and Nolan's other so-called white friends, they decided to leave the island around 4:30. So they were roughly on White Devil's Horn Island from 11:30 to 4:30. That is about 5 hours. About 5 hours. Now, one question that has to be asked, Art, why did y'all leave so soon? Because they party on Horn Island all day long. Y'all didn't leave at sunset. Y'all didn't leave at sundown. Y'all left after only being there 5 hours. That's a little suspicious, Art. And I haven't heard anybody ask any of them, why did y'all decide to leave after only being there for 5 hours? Did y'all plan to only be on White Devil's Horn Island for 5 hours? Why did y'all leave at that time? But we'll deal with that later. So then let's listen to Javon, Nolan's other best friend. Now, another problem I got with this whole story, Art, is Nolan allegedly had too many best friends. I'm trying to find out, how does Nolan have so many best friends? And why did all of these so-called best friends leave their best friend on White Devil's Horn Island without his cell phone and keys? I'm trying to figure this out. So Javon claims he's Nolan's best friend. Warren claims he's Nolan's best friend. And Trayston allegedly claims that he's Warren's best friend. So did Warren have 3 best friends? Excuse me. Did Nolan have 3 best friends? Did Nolan have 13 best friends? Did Nolan have 30 best friends? Because if Javon is the best friend of Nolan And if Warren is the best friend of Nolan, and if Tristan is the best friend of Nolan, exactly how many best friends did Nolan have? Are y'all making this up? Who did Nolan tell Warren was his best friend? Who did Nolan ever tell Tristan was his best friend? I'm not going to question Javon, because he's a brother. And I do believe that there's a strong chance that they may have been best friends. And I say that not only because Javon is a brother, Art, but I also felt that Javon, through the investigation team and alley-oop, with some of the answers that he gave on TMZ. Some of Javon's answers, in my opinion, kind of made it clear to me he actually cared about Nolan. He actually cared about Nolan. I believe Javon actually cared about Nolan. And because of that, I'm willing to say that Javon may have actually been Nolan's best friend. I wish somebody would have asked Javon, Art, to your knowledge, has Nolan ever called Warren his best friend? Has Nolan ever called Tristan his best friend? To your knowledge, Javon, has Nolan ever told you that Warren and Tristan were best friends of his? Because, Art, I'm having a problem with this three best friend narrative. Okay? I used to be 18 years old. You might have one best friend. You may have two. Don't get me wrong. If you all hang in a pack, you could have three best friends. But according to Javon's own words, Art, he didn't really hang around with them other guys too much. That's what I allegedly thought I heard him say. He didn't hang around with them guys too much. So if you got 2 or 3 or 4 best friends, you guys normally travel as a group. Javon seemed like he kind of spent most of his time with Nolan alone, just the two of them, not with Tristan and Warren. Although he knew them, it didn't appear that he hung out with them on the regular. So how could they all then be best friends? It's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's unlikely. So, according to Javon, Art, he saw Nolan at 3:40 on the island. According to Javon, what I heard him say to TMZ allegedly was that he had another friend who was involved in an altercation and that he left Nolan at about 3:40 to go check on his buddy, because according to Javon, his buddy was on another ship, and the parents of whomever on this other ship were trying to get him off the island because he was crashing out. He never said who this friend was. He never exactly told us what happened. But he said, I left at 3:40 to go check on my friend on another boat because, quote unquote, well, these are not his words, I'm paraphrasing. He was kind of wilding out, crashing out, and he needed to help calm him down. I'm paraphrasing. He said when he got back, Nolan was nowhere to be found, and I'm paraphrasing. And Nolan's boat that he came on, Warren's boat, the so-called Big Daddy, the 22-foot Triton, had already left the scene. So according to Javon, I left Nolan at 3:40 to go deal with another situation. I came back, he was gone. According to Katie, the white girl who Nolan's white best friends are trying to use as an alibi in this situation. Okay, because they claim, and Warren said the same thing to Officer B.T. Coon when he spoke with him. They claim that Nolan told them, I'm going to hang back on this island and talk to Katie. You guys go ahead and I'll get back however I get back. Again, I'm paraphrasing. But guess what? We learned through Katie's sister that Katie said she has no knowledge of Nolan ever saying that. In fact, Katie said, Art, that Nolan told her, I got to get ready to head back to the boat because my friends are leaving soon. That don't sound like somebody who plans on staying, Art. Okay? According to her sister, Katie said Nolan told Katie It's time for me to head back to the boat because my friends are going to be leaving soon. As far as I'm concerned, Art, Javon and Katie both threw us an alley-oop. Javon and Katie are throwing Sheriff Ledbetter of Jackson County an alley-oop because neither one of them are corroborating the story of Nolan's white friends on that boat. In fact, Javon said, this ain't adding up. Javon said, it's not like Nolan to say, you guys go ahead and leave me on this island and I'm just going to stay back to talk to this girl who I barely know. According to Javon, it don't make no sense. Javon ain't stupid, Art. That's his friend. He know damn well Nolan didn't tell them that he was going to stay back on that ship. And then Katie, I'm going to give a little bit of respect to Katie on this situation. Because as a white girl, Art, for her to come out and say that is not what happened, for her to come out and say that Nolan told me I got to get back to the boat because my friends are leaving, for her to say that, Art, that took a little bit of courage and honesty. That took a little bit of integrity. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to give her too much credit because she is trying to clear her name. What Katie is basically doing, Art, is she's saying, listen, y'all did whatever y'all did to Nolan, but you're not going to add me to the narrative. I'm not serving as nobody's alibi. I'm not helping nobody get out of this situation. You're not going to use me as a decoy, but I still appreciate Katie speaking up for Nolan, Art, because she didn't have to do it. Although she's trying to protect herself and stay out of the investigation, I appreciate Katie for letting the world know Nolan told me I got to head back to the boat because my friends are getting ready to leave. Now, according to Katie, Art, she spoke to Nolan sometime between 3 and 4:30. Now, her window appears to be wider than everybody else's window. So Javon's window is much smaller. He said, I saw him at 3:40, went to deal with another situation. By the time I came back, they were gone. Katie said I spoke with him between 3 and 4:30. And I allege, Art, one of the reasons that Katie is making her window so wide is she trying to leave a little bit of wiggle room for Warren and them to get their story straight, allegedly. I think Katie trying to leave a little bit of wiggle room for Warren and them to get their story straight, Art. Now, according to our sister Christine, and my heart goes out to Sister Christine, Nolan's mother. My heart deeply, deeply goes out to you, Queen. According to Christine, Art, she heard from a coach who ran into Nolan on the island as well. And according to the coach, he spoke to Nolan between 2:30 and 3:30. So Javon didn't see him after 3:40. The coach spoke to him sometime between 2:30 and 3:30. And Katie said her conversation with Nolan was between 3 and 4:30. So you know what that means, Art? We can pretty much conclude that Nolan was likely to have been unalived, Art, sometime within the hour of 3:30 to 4:30. I'm going to insinuate that Nolan's life was taken because I do not believe he accidentally drowned. If he drowned, he was forcibly drowned. And we'll get to that in a minute. If Nolan drowned, he was forcibly drowned. He did not accidentally drown. He was a great swimmer. Miss me with the nonsense. That boy did not drown. If he drowned, it was by force. So again, Art, all three of these people, arguably the last three to see him alive, except for those who took his life, Katie, the coach, and Javon, are arguably the last three people to see Nolan alive, except for those who took his life on that boat, allegedly. That's my position. So they're all basically cutting off around 3:30, Art. Remember, they made the call for the emergency sea tow at 4 o'clock. Javon said he cut out 3:40. The coach, 3:30. They made the call at 4 o'clock. That conversation we heard, the Cito call, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that took place at 4. It sounded like there was some struggling going on in the background. Nolan could have been getting unalived while they were making the call, Art. Nolan could have been getting unalived while they were making the call. Nolan could have been getting choked out while they was on the phone with Cito. So again, Art, my position is Nolan lost his life somewhere within the hour of 3:30 to 4:30.
If the other two boats carried witnesses, and by every account they did, then those witnesses have accounts, and those accounts either match the timeline or they break it. There is no version of a competent investigation where you do not collect them. Whether investigators have quietly done exactly that, we do not know, because open investigations do not narrate themselves. The absence of a public statement is not proof of an absence of work. But after a month with no cause of death and no arrest, silence stops functioning as procedure and starts functioning as an invitation for people to fill it in themselves. He asks why the group left after roughly 5 hours, when, by his account, people typically stay on that island until sundown. He offers no answer. It is a question, and it is a reasonable one, and nobody has addressed it. Then he goes to the timeline, and this is the strongest stretch of the interview. 3 separate people describe speaking with Nolan Wells that afternoon. A friend who says he left him in the middle of the afternoon to go help with a situation on another boat and returned to find him gone. A young woman on the beach whose conversation with him is placed in that same general window and who, according to her sister, does not recall him saying he intended to stay behind. And a coach who told Nolan's mother he spoke with him earlier that afternoon and that he was not impaired. That third account matters more than the interview gives it credit for. It closes the door on the version of events that circulated for the first 2 weeks, the one where an intoxicated teenager wandered into the water alone. At least one first-hand account directly contradicts it. Where he moves from question to theory is what he does with those 3 timings. He suggests they may have placed their last contact earlier than it truly was, in order to keep themselves outside the window in which something happened. He is explicit that he does not believe any of the 3 was involved. But there is no evidence any of them shifted anything. At least 2 are reportedly cooperating with authorities. And the simpler explanation is that people who were doing ordinary things on a holiday afternoon do not have precise timestamps for when they last saw a friend. Nobody does. He also notes that the friend told a national outlet police had never spoken with him. If accurate, that is a serious gap, and it is worth pressing on. Then he goes to the phone, and this is the part where the accusation and the fact need to be pulled apart carefully. The fact is not in dispute. An 18-year-old was reported missing from an island he could not walk off, and his phone was on the mainland. His mother and a friend's mother used a location app to trace it to a house, went there, and waited while it was brought out to them. Nobody in an official capacity has publicly explained how the phone got there without him. Not the sheriff's department, not the district attorney. It is the most concrete, unexplained detail in this entire case. What he alleges goes considerably further. He alleges the phone was taken deliberately to remove evidence. He alleges the delay in bringing it out was people deleting social media accounts and coordinating their story. He alleges the house being dark meant people were hiding. He also raises a call that one of the teenagers made to Nolan's mother late that night, asking whether she had heard from her son, and asks how a mother was supposed to hear from a son whose phone was in that caller's possession, and whether she was told it was there. None of that has been established. No warrant has been issued on that basis. No charge has been filed. Those are his allegations, and we are labeling them as allegations. But you do not need his interpretation for the underlying fact to sit badly. The phone came home. He did not.
A little earlier than it actually took place to make sure she can't be dragged into the investigation as a witness to a crime. Is it possible that the coach is putting his conversation with Nolan earlier than what it was, Art, to make sure he cannot get dragged into the investigation? I don't think they had anything to do with it, but they could have been a witness to a homicide, Art. They could have been witness to a homicide. If they did not see each other, if none of those 3 people, the coach, Javon, and Katie, if they did not see each other at all talking to Nolan, If none of them saw each other talking to Nolan, at least two of them are lying about the time they last saw Nolan. Are you following me, Art? All I'm saying is I have my suspicions as to whether or not this convenient 3:30 cutoff window, I have my suspicions that this convenient 3:30 cutoff window may have not actually been the time they saw Nolan. They may have saw Nolan closer to the time he lost his life. Now stay with me, Art. I want to back up for a minute. And I want to say this to Brother Elmore, Nolan's stepfather. And I want to say this to Coach Tracy, who I believe was one of Nolan's coaches. Brother Elmore, the stepfather, and Coach Tracy, the coach, both said on national television, Art, that they don't think race played a role in this at all. Elmore, Tracy, two dark-skinned black men in Mississippi, and both of them said on national television, I don't think race had anything to do with this case. I am disappointed in Brother Elmore. I am disappointed in Coach Tracy. How dare you help these young people avoid the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. federal hate crimes law, Art? By you saying you don't think this had anything to do with race, Brother Elmore and Coach Tracy, you are helping these white folks avoid federal hate crimes charges. And let me tell you why this is important, Art. Let me tell you why this is important. Under the federal hate crimes law, Matthew Shepard, James Byrd, signed by Barack Obama, 2009. Under the Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, you can go to jail for life. You can go to jail for life under the Federal Hate Crimes Law. So if you can go to jail for life under the Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, why is Nolan's stepfather and coach telling white folks they don't think it had anything to do with race? I still love my brother Elmore. I still love my brother Coach Tracy. But would y'all please watch what comes out of your mouth during this investigation? Because you are undermining justice for Nolan. I hope you're listening, Brother Elmore. And I hope you're listening, Coach Tracy. You are undermining justice for Nolan by saying you don't think race had anything to do with it. How in the hell do you know? Do you know if race had anything to do with it? How well do you know these young people? It was 30 of them, Art. It was damn near 30 white youth spread across 3 boats. How many of them did Elmore know? How many of them did Coach Tracy know? So how are you going to go on TV and say, I don't think it had anything to do with race? Why are you helping them avoid accountability for what they may have done? I don't know if they did it, Art. You don't know if they did it. They don't know if they did it. And they definitely don't know if it was motivated by race. What they should have said, Art, is what Javon said. And that's why I like the young brother Javon. That's why I like that young brother Javon. His mother, Sister Tashima, shout out to you. You raised a good kid. When TMZ asked Javon if he thought it had anything to do with race, Art, when TMZ asked Javon if he thought this had anything to do with race, he said, what? I don't want to answer that question. I don't want to answer that question. Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Or, Art, they could have said, I don't know. Nolan's stepfather could have said, I don't know if it had anything to do with race. Coach Tracy should have said, I don't know if it had anything to do with race. But to say you don't think it had to do with race when he was the only black boy across 3 ships? Are you out of your mind? Why would you say that and help them avoid the Federal Hate Crimes Act? Javon gave a better answer than those 2 black men. Javon, a child, gave a better answer than those 2 black men, Art, when he said, I don't want to answer the question. And shout out to Javon, Art. He's intelligent. You know why? Because by saying, I don't want to answer the question, he answered the question.
He raises the fundraiser started for the teenagers the retention of prominent legal counsel, and the deletion of social media accounts, and treats them as indicators of guilt. That inference does not hold. People who become the subject of a national story get lawyers because that is what any competent adult would advise, and they delete accounts because the alternative is thousands of strangers in their messages. Legal representation is not evidence of anything except representation. It is worth saying plainly, because it is the kind of reasoning that gets repeated until it hardens. But then the distress call. There are two separate things here, and people keep welding them together. The first is the call itself, and it exists. A call was made to a marine towing service in the late afternoon, reporting a vessel taking on water. In the recording, the caller gives one depth and then revises it substantially. The operator asks whether he wants the Coast Guard contacted, and he declines. She asks repeatedly how many people are aboard, and the answers she gets are not direct. He answers that there are no adults, then that everyone is under 21, then eventually gives a number with a qualifier in front of it. He also raises the operator's own phrasing during the exchange, which he finds unusual, and wonders aloud whether she was reacting to something she was hearing. Judge the tone of that recording yourself. It is documented. The second thing is the enhanced background audio, and this is where we have to part company with him. An audio engineer processed the recording and reported hearing specific phrases underneath the conversation. He treats that interpretation as very close to established fact, and says he believes it. We cannot go there, and it has nothing to do with who did the work. Noise reduction on a low-quality phone recording cannot recover information that was never captured in the first place. It amplifies what is present, and it can generate artifacts that the human ear resolves into speech when no speech is there. Two qualified engineers can process the same file and produce different transcripts. Until that audio goes through independent forensic examination with published methodology, what anyone hears in it is not evidence. It is interpretation. The call is real. What people say they hear underneath it is unverified. And if you have been sharing a screenshot of that transcript, you have been sharing something nobody has confirmed. He then goes to the autopsy, and raises that when the family's independent pathologist received the body, throat and lung tissue were not present, and asks how anyone is meant to distinguish drowning from strangulation without them. He also raises a discolored area at the back of the head noted by the second examiner, and argues it cannot be explained by blood settling because of the position the body was found and transported in. This needs context that the interview does not supply. When a state medical examiner performs an autopsy, tissue is routinely retained for microscopic examination and toxicology. That is standard practice, not a cover-up. So there are two possible explanations, and they lead to completely different places. Either the material was retained as evidence in an open investigation, which is ordinary, or it was not made available to the family's pathologist, which would seriously compromise their ability to reach an independent conclusion. Nobody official has said which. That silence is the story, not the tissue itself. What we can say is that the second examination reportedly could not determine a cause of death, and the state's report, the one that might resolve all of it, is sealed. We told you we would flag what does not hold, so here is the clearest example. He compares how long a body took to surface in a Mississippi River in 1955 to how long it took here, and treats the difference as evidence a body was held and disposed of later. That comparison does not work. How long a body takes to surface depends on water temperature, depth, currents, body composition, and whether anything is restraining it. A slow inland river and the open Gulf in July are not comparable environments. 2 days is well within the ordinary range. It indicates nothing on its own. We point this out for a specific reason. Every weak claim makes the strong ones easier to dismiss, and this case has already been damaged once by something fabricated. His strongest structural argument is the one that draws the least attention. Horn Island is federal land. He argues that fact alone, alongside the possibility of a federal civil rights violation, is grounds for federal involvement rather than a county sheriff running it alone. That is a jurisdictional question with a real answer, and it is worth demanding one. He closes by calling on the family's attorneys and national civil rights figures to escalate publicly, and by placing this case alongside 2 others in Mississippi where families are waiting on the same office for the same thing. No charges have been filed. Everyone named here is entitled to the presumption of innocence. Here is what is not contested. An 18-year-old went to an island he could not leave on foot. His phone came back without him. 2 pathologists have examined him and neither has stated a cause of death. The state's report is finished and sealed, and his mother has waited more than a month to learn what happened to her son. Everything else in this case is argued. That part is not.
With no way to get off. You left your best friend on an island, your so-called brother. You left him on an island with no way to get off, and you took his phone and his keys. Can you explain that to me, Warren? While you're thinking about it, I got another question for you, Warren, while you're thinking about it. You said at 11 o'clock, you called Miss Christine to see if she heard from her son. Warren said, Art, I called Miss Christine to see if she heard from Nolan. She said she had not heard from Nolan. Can I ask you a question, Warren? If you took his phone, how in the hell was his mother supposed to hear from her son when you have the son's phone?